Okay, we are talking today about collage, which is art made by combining a variety of materials like photos, papers, colored construction paper, any variety, generally of 2D, like flat materials, combined together makes a collage. Before we go into good collage techniques, I want to give you a really simple how-to. When you are collaging, first thing, the basic thing that really helps is making sure you apply your glue to your smaller paper. So if I want to glue this little guy right here, then instead of smearing glue all over here, not really knowing where it's going to go, I should apply glue to the back of him. Make sure that your smaller paper is on some scrap of paper so that you're not getting extra glue all over the tables, because that's gross to work in and it's gross for people that come after you. And then make sure you glue all the way to the edge. So I can glue or smear glue all the way off the edge of this little thing because I have some extra paper underneath to catch that extra. And then when I go ahead and apply him to where he is supposed to be on my artwork, I just make sure to smooth those edges down that have glue on them, and everything should look good. So we'll talk about those edges when we talk about craftsmanship in just a second. So most people think that collage is something like this, where it's a whole bunch of pictures from a magazine stuck together, and it's like the same topic. Oh, it's all about food and everything stuck together, and that's a collage. But I don't want you to think like that about collage. I'd rather you consider collage more like these examples. So what is great about both of these is they use pieces of colored paper, either from magazines or construction paper, and put them back together to make their own art out of them. So instead of always looking to find the exact picture that you need for your food collage, the avocado or the gingerbread man, you create art by using scraps of things. So they put together different blues for the sky or different green for Yoshi's nose here to make their artwork. What is also really nice about these is both of them have torn edges, which is a fun technique we can talk about in just a second. It's really helpful to make your art look more interesting, and it sort of takes away some of the pressure to cut perfectly on the edge. When you collage, some smart tips to make your art look better, as I mentioned, is to use colored pieces to make a texture. So I can make my background of my feather picture here by finding different pieces of this same light blue or different pieces of light grays, ripping them with my fingers, and then piecing them together to make this background texture. On top of that, you could put your own artwork like I've done here with my pen drawing. But that's a really good way to use magazine. You can also use scissor cut pieces of even text to create a texture. So I wanted to sort of simulate a pile of papers or a mess of stuff like that. I cut a whole bunch of different chunks of writing and piled them together to create this collage. You can use an entire image as a background for something else. So here I found this entire image of people walking in a square and added my own little sketch that I then glued in so it sort of looks like it belongs but still stands out as a little bit different. So you notice what's been added there. And then of course you can always add in some sort of photograph to a drawing. So this little guy that I glued in the beginning, my son here, I printed him out and then I added him to my own drawing and coloring as a background. So what you collage could sometimes be your background, it could sometimes be your foreground. It just sort of depends how you're going to use these different parts and pieces of papers. However, your craftsmanship really matters. If you don't do a good job with your craftsmanship, you get loose edges where things peel up and it always looks like it's about to fall apart. And that's never quality workmanship. We don't want to have stuff like that. So follow the tip that I gave you about gluing on the back of small things and getting all the way to the edge. Make sure that the way that you cut is appropriate as well. A lot of people will go ahead and just have something like this, and they think that's a good enough cutout. It's really not. So take the time to cut right up to the edge of something. It's even better than leaving a little border of white, because the border of white, or whatever color background it's coming from, can be very distracting. But you do have to work with the limitations of what you find sometimes in a magazine. So this has got a little text box here. I can cut that off, and when I collage, I'm going to just have to hide that little piece behind another part of my collage, or if I get rid of that blue, I can sort of try to make this turn into a bite that's been taken out of this burger, so it looks like it's on purpose. But make sure your cutting around stuff is good, because something like this is not a good way to show a thing in your collage. The same is true when you're dealing with text. So say I found this piece of text that I really want to use. I want these words for free to be in my messaging, perhaps. You can cut stuff nicely with a box around it. Often looks good, especially if it's just going to be way too difficult to cut nicely around each item. But definitely don't cut crazily and all over the place, or it's not going to end up looking nice. So I should even go a little closer, because I have some extra things hanging on in that blue space that are going to be a distraction from what I want in my collaging. If you're going to tear stuff, say I wanted to tear this little iguana and have him have a torn edge, you just need to tear slowly and carefully. So holding one side of the tear with your fingers, and then the other side, slowly work your way around. And if you notice, the way that you pull determines if you see the white torn edge of the paper or not. So practice a little bit if you have the certain look that you're going for, so that you have a nice torn edge. Torn edge is really not always a good look for an object that's going to be in your foreground or the front of your image. It's really better when you're using your pieces to make up that background, kind of like we talked about. However, the very first examples I showed you do have torn edges on their foreground objects. So as long as you continue that for a reason, you can make those torn edges look good, especially if you don't like working with scissors. So that's your basic introduction to collage techniques. Hopefully it was pretty easy and you can apply that to your work.